Okay, Uku, so you said if I do this, and then go like this, and then finish this, then all I have to do now is transformation jutsu. I don't I don't think I did this right. Now, I've recently started watching Naruto, so please don't ruin anything for me. I am nowhere near done with the anime. But if you're that one person who commented on my last video saying that they're like the only or one of the only people to watch any more than just one of my videos, shout out to you, by the way, Ellie Fat Cat, then you may have guessed that I have pulled some random philosophical idea that I wanted to talk about on the channel. And that guess would be correct. That is exactly what I'm going to do. Now, I wanted to focus on Rock Lee. Personally, he's like my favorite character in the anime so far. I just think he's persevered more so than anybody else in the anime, to include Naruto. And don't get me wrong, he's done plenty of that by this point, believe you me, and you'll know firsthand if you've seen the anime. But, I mean, Naruto, even, I think I enunciated that wrong, but point is, even if nobody believed in him, he at least had the basic concepts of all of the ninjutsu stuff, and even if he couldn't do it well, he could still do it to like some degree, and once the show actually starts, you know that he increasingly becomes better and better and better. Rock Lee, on the other hand, just can't do any or almost any of the basic ninja stuff. No ninjutsu, no genjutsu, it's all taijutsu, strictly. That's all he has. And he has persevered with just that throughout the entirety of his showing in the show, or at least up to this point. Again, I don't know if he learns anything past this point. But as much as I admire him for that, I actually wanted to focus on a particular failure. Really the only failure I've seen thus far from him. And that is, of course, his fight with Gaara. Now, if you've seen those episodes, you know that that fight didn't go great. It might have ended less desirably than he would have liked. And I think that's the point that I really want to focus on in this video. As you know, if you've seen the episodes and you've seen how the entire fight goes out, he ends up fighting Gaara. He starts to gain an advantage when he loses the weights, but then Gaara manages to slip out, and at that point, really, he should have just thrown in the towel. And that's what I kind of wanted to talk about. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, if you're that one dude who's seen my past videos, you know I always encourage everybody to push past their own limits. We never improve as people if we don't learn to push past what we think we can do. We're just stuck there. We have to go further than what we thought was originally possible. Otherwise, we're just kind of stuck in the same place. But at the same time, there is a limit to that. And this is demonstrated very well in that series of episodes and in the conclusion of that fight. Rock Lee really should have just given in. And even after the point where he starts to gain another advantage, if you haven't seen the show or if you need a reminder, what ends up happening is that there are 8 gates of chakra. I believe they're called gates. Might be doors, but I'm pretty sure it's gates. And he opens up 5 of them, which allows him to acquire even more insane physical ability. But it also put a huge strain on his body. And that's really why he should have just thrown in the towel, because he starts to become counterproductive. He has this big, but still relatively small goal in front of him of defeating Gaara. But that's not his main goal. That's not what he put everything into. He put everything into becoming a full-fledged ninja. He wanted to completely prove that his way of ninjutsu, or the ninja way as he calls it, was a good way, that it's viable. But once he started doing that to his body, it started to become counterproductive. He was sacrificing a lot to achieve this smaller goal in comparison. And people tend to do this more often than you might realize. A real world example I'll link it, or not link. I'll link it in the video description and maybe show you in the video if I can find it. But if I can't, what ends up happening is that there's this MMA fighter, a female MMA fighter, and she gets trapped in an armbar. At which point, if you can't escape it, you need to tap out. That's the bottom line. If you can't escape an armbar, you just need to tap out. But this individual did not. And her elbow ended up being broken at that point. If she's lucky, it was just dislocated, but I'm pretty sure it broke. Again, I'll put it in the video if I can find it, or I'll at least link it in the description below. But at that point, she ended up compromising not only her career, but just her life in general. If her elbow really did break, then her arm is just maimed for life. That's it. That's what happens when you break an elbow. And that's what happened to Rock Lee, even more so when he got to the point where, of course, Gaara ended up crushing his, if I remember correctly, left arm and left leg. But he's all right now. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Point is that he got to the point where, I mean, I'm sure later on in the anime somehow he recovers because it's an anime. But at the time, he ends up compromising his main goal. And we need to learn some humility in this respect. We need to learn that sometimes it's better for us to back off from that smaller goal. It doesn't mean giving up outright, right? It doesn't mean that you stop trying to become better or stronger. It just means that you're taking the chance, or having enough humility to know that this is going to do more harm than good in achieving your goal. You also see this in a lot of athletes. Like I'm sure you've seen on Instagram and TikTok, where you've seen people try to do insane weights, and either their muscle tears, or their tendons pop out, or their ligaments pop out, and it causes huge damage to that individual. And that's because, a lot of people don't recognize that, yeah, it'd be nice to try to achieve this one small goal of being able to lift this much. But you have to recognize in the overall goal of trying to achieve the physical aptitude you want is going to be counterproductive to push yourself to this point. Now, again, when you're trying to exercise, it is about pushing past your normal mental limits. You're going to suffer a little, and it's going to hurt a little, and you're going to not enjoy that process quite a bit because you're straining. But you can't push past the point where your body can't physically handle whatever weight you're trying to lift. Otherwise, you end up doing damage to your body. Same thing with like every other athlete. Runners, for example. One thing they ended up doing is in an attempt to make them lighter, which I don't think actually works in making you faster, at least this method, but they'll end up like basically starving themselves. In theory, what it's supposed to do is make you lighter, which it does, I guess, but it also has tremendous negative effects on your body. In this specific case that I'm talking about, the most common thing is that your bones become so brittle that you end up breaking them very easily, which is a lot more counterproductive than just feeding yourself right, at least in the long run. So the lesson that we learn from Rock Lee and these other athletes is that we need to push ourselves. We need to go past what we think our bodies and our minds are possible. But we can't go past the point where it starts to become damaging. And to be clear, there are circumstances where you might want to push past this limit. But it's an entirely different circumstance. Like, if you've seen up to this point, then you know earlier in the show, Rock Lee pushed past a certain limit that damaged his body, but that was because he wanted to protect someone. At which point, that was the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal was to keep somebody safe. In which case, it was worth risking his own body. But in the set rules of this minor goal is going to risk your ultimate goal, then you have to have a little bit of humility. And to be clear, this doesn't just exist in physical. This also exists in mental. Like, if you're trying to become a doctor, but you're taking too many classes, and you end up failing some as opposed to taking less classes and being able to focus on them more, you end up hurting yourself more. Or even if you are able to complete all your classes, if you're having a mental breakdown, then you're doing more mental harm than good. And it might hurt you later on down the line. And you have to have the humility to say, yeah, I'm just going to have to take less classes this time around because ultimately I'm not going to be able to handle them. And that's okay if that's the reason you're doing it. Now, if you're doing it to be lazy and you can actually handle it, then obviously you shouldn't be doing that. But if you're at the point where you're at a mental breakdown, you need to learn that, yeah, it's okay to have a little humility and go back if it's going to help me out in the long run, or even if it's just to keep you sane. So this limit doesn't just exist mentally. I mean, it doesn't just exist physically. It also exists mentally. So whatever you're doing, I always, again, I can't emphasize this enough, encourage you to push past your limits, because you never grow if you don't. But you also can't push yourself to the absolute breaking point where it causes a mental breakdown or you start to damage your body. What's that? Is that Uku? Alright, one more time. Here we go. Transformation Jutsu! Okay. I clearly need to go and practice, so I will leave the video at that. But before I go, make sure to leave a comment down below if you have any other ideas, or again, just want to tell me how amazing I am. Certainly don't mind that. Tell me how my new look is, though I doubt I'm going to be able to keep it. Otherwise, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell button. I post every other week. So until next time, hear nothing and listen to all. Bye, guys.